I'm Anita Pace, and it's great to have you with us for the October edition of our Pacecast. Now, today's guest is someone I'm very excited to be talking to. He's the Artistic Director and the Chief Executive of the Freedom Festival Arts Trust. It's none other than Mikey Martins. Hey!
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. I know you've had an incredibly busy last few months building up to what was another successful Freedom Festival, which we'll talk about, no doubt, a bit later. But I am so excited to talk to you because, as you might expect, we do quite a bit of research on our guests for the Pacecast. And I was reading some things about you and I was thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to hear all these stories about your upbringing and street performing. And so it's going to be fascinating talking to you. But before we get into all that, you should, I hope, have brought something in with you.
Yes,
which is meaningful.
I have. Yes.
So do you want to share that with us and talk to us about why it's important to you?
Yeah, and it'll link back to, it's quite simple, really. It's my passport.
Okay.
And there's quite a lot to this. It's not just about feeling very lucky to be in a position where I travel a lot, but it's about internationalism. And it's about something that's very dear to me in terms of in my work, but also personally. Everything I do is to try and connect different cultures together, different international collaborations, and it goes right back to my upbringing, which is in a very small seaside town with a lot of tourists who came to visit, and so I met lots of strangers. And there's something that I realised when I was thinking about this conversation about it's a thread that has always been through my life about being curious about other cultures, meeting strangers, and then as I developed the career, it became about connecting different artists or festivals or audiences to different parts of the world. So it's not just about going on holiday. No. It's what I mean.
But it's that natural curiosity that obviously you have that makes your story so interesting. So let's dial it right back to the beginning. You mentioned growing up in a tourist area, Cornwall, I understand.
Yes.
So let's go back to that. So you grew up in Cornwall, and then that was the start of this very interesting journey that's brought you to where you are today. Yeah, and
I think I'll go back another generation because my mother and father are both from Madeira, and they then emigrate to the UK in the 1950s, early 60s, and they find a place called St Ives in Cornwall, which I'm sure many listeners would know, and they settle, and they have children, myself and my sister. So we grew up in this very touristy hospitality. My mum and dad both worked in a hotel. My dad worked in the same hotel for 48 years.
Wow.
They sold the hotel 4 times, but you always got Tony. He came with the hotel. Bit Manuel, bit 42.
Oh, really? I'm visualising him now.
Yeah. And there's something about it sort of starts there with this. We were always in that world where people would come and stay, and new people. So I guess we kind of learn as children to be welcoming or to be curious, as you say. And then I didn't really realise until my sort of 30s, really, how much of an influence that has on you. Because then you just keep hearing about other places. You keep hearing about different towns in the UK or different countries. And then that curiosity just grows and grows and grows because it's quite straightforward. It's just people. And when they go on holiday, they're probably in quite a good mood. Yeah,
you've seen the best of them.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it starts. It's kind of curiosity. And then, strangely, I mean, a lot of people do say, well, why are you not living in St Ives? What a beautiful place to... I couldn't get out of there fast enough when I was sort of 16, 17. I just
Sounds
wanted
like you had
to
itchy
travel.
Feet. Yeah, that curiosity. You wanted to go and see other places.
Yeah. And I think that's also part of that.
So when you were at school, was there something that you wanted to do when you grew up, so to speak?
Not really. I went through several different things. I was really into football. I was the Cornish goalkeeper. I played England schoolboys. I was really into sport.
Yeah, you were good.
I was good, but I didn't get very tall. So I know watching kind of Match of the Day through my 20s, I realised the guys that I lost my place to are about 6'4", and I never got beyond 5'10". So I think that career was never really going to happen, and probably for the best. Yeah. I was really into sports, drama, and I was really into maths.
Oh, an odd combination.
Yeah, so I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but it was easy to be pushed towards certain things. And I didn't really think I want a career in the arts. That was never it was something I enjoyed doing. I was quite into performing in the school play, you know, that kind of thing. In fact, I just turned 50, and of course I had my partner put on a fantastic surprise birthday party. Lots of people came from different parts of my life, and lots of photos came out.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd seen some of those photos from school plays and things like that, and it was quite funny to look at, because of course in Bugsy Malone I was Bugsy Malone. You know?
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. So there was a thread developing, but it wasn't clear where that would go.
So St Ives you said goodbye to. Where did you go from St Ives?
I went to London, so it was that classic
streets
I want
paved
to go to
with gold.
Yeah. I ended up in London, and it was tricky. It was quite a tricky time. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew I wanted to try and keep moving forward. And then I became quite obsessed with Covent Garden, with the whole atmosphere of Covent Garden and the market and the street performers and this kind of vibrant atmosphere, which I guess was quite familiar, because again it's touristy, so there was a familiarity about this place, but it was full of these interesting characters that were doing these shows, and there was something. So, and I I spent loads of time hanging around a market stall with now a very dear friend of mine, and since then 34 years or whatever it was, a juggling stall, and he taught me to juggle, and then I got into circus and juggling and all this stuff, and then he said, I'm going on holiday to India for 6 months. Okay, did you want my job? Do you want to run this market stall in Covent Garden? And I said, well, yeah, that's cool. I get to stand here all day and I practice this stuff and I sell things to people and make a commission. That sounds pretty cool. Didn't think so much about how that is in January, February, March, when it's freezing cold, there's no one around. But it began this really lovely story of, well, by the time he came back, I was running 2 stalls, and I was now sort of the manager in the company. I was travelling around the world doing workshops for corporate clients. Still juggling.
Right, okay.
I wrote a book.
About juggling,
which turns up in my life occasionally. You can still get it on Amazon. It's very cheap. Yeah, it's been reduced. And it was funny, I don't know if anybody will remember this, but there was a moment, I think it's kind of 1990, 89, 90, where there was a box set of juggling balls, which was the most popular Christmas gift in all the kind of national newspapers. This was the thing that everybody wanted. There was this weird moment.
I can't imagine that today.
Yeah, it was bizarre, really. And it was to the point where we would literally be flown across Europe to big companies, corporate gatherings, team building weeks, things like that, and we would do this sort of fake sort of demonstration about problem solving, and use the analogy of juggling, and then everyone would reach down underneath their stall and they would find a set of juggling, and they would all, so we would teach en masse big corporate companies how to juggle, which seemed like the most bizarre, surreal leap from this wide-eyed Cornish boy standing in Covent Garden looking at this thing, and then very quickly it escalated, which is the story of my life really, into this job, which then became quite good and quite successful. And then at the same time I was getting to know all these performers. And this is a time where you have people like Eddie Izzard, Tony Slattery, they're just stopping their street performing and they're getting big on TV and they're doing more stand-up. So it's not quite like it was today. You had this kind of mix of sort of comedian stroke street performers. So it was bonkers. People doing Phil Jupiter's, people like that, just doing the most hilarious things on the street and then trying to make money from the audience by doing that. And I got to know all these people. And the stall I mentioned before, the juggling stall, was right opposite the West Piazza, which is where the big shows happen. Yeah. So the performers would come and hang out, and if they were jugglers or circus acts, they would be sort of training in between acts, practicing. So I very quickly got to know all these people, and it got to a point where I thought, well, I could probably do that. Maybe I could do that. I could
probably one of the statues or something. You mean?
I wanted to do something a bit more dynamic.
Right. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm always fascinated. I always do stop and look at them, and I'm trying to get them to obviously move, as everyone is, but I just don't know how they do it.
Yeah,
I honestly don't know how they do it.
I know quite a lot of people. I used to know quite a bit, and they have quite odd characters.
Yeah,
they're very particular characters.
They must be.
Yeah,
and do they literally stay there all day?
Yeah.
And they don't.
Yeah, shifts, a few hours.
Yeah,
and then have a break for a bit. But
they just must zone out.
Odd. Yeah,
like take meditation to another level.
I think as I've kind of gone through a career in performing arts in this world, I've met lots of different types and hit different parts of the sector, from the comedy to the circus to the festivals to the TV stuff. And I'm sorry if anybody's out there who is a living statue, great thing to do, but generally very odd people. Don't know why. It's a particular thing.
When I grew up, I want to be a living statue in Covent Garden. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to you.
Yeah. So yeah, that starts to happen. Then I'd start to do a show, and then
when you say I started to do a show, so what is that? What's the show?
Okay, what I used to do.
This is X-rated? Like
No.
Okay.
No. This is in Covent Garden in the daytime with families and tourists. Like I said, I was in the sort of circusy world, so a very good juggler and this kind of skill set. And then I was watching a couple of friends, who are still friends, who were doing shows where they would do an escape. They would kind of get tied up in straight jackets and chains and this kind of thing. Escapology.
Yes.
Think Houdini.
Yes.
Let's make it really, glamorous. And then I remember talking to one of my friends. And I said, I can do lots of routines with juggling, with different tricks, this kind of stuff. That's fine. I could make a show with that. But I want a finale that's a bit more exciting. So I said, how do you do that? And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll tie you up. And about 5 minutes later, I went, oh my God, really? Okay, I'm going to do this. I can't reveal any tricks of the trade, but there are tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
So I used to do a show where there would be various routines building up to this big finale where I would get tied up.
So you were always getting tied up rather than doing the tying up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, someone from the audience would tie you up.
Okay.
Manacles, a sack which covered my body and my head poked out the top, and 50 metres of chains all the way around the outside, and I would escape in 2 minutes. Mostly.
I'm guessing there was never an occasion where you didn't, because obviously you know the tricks of the trade, so you always did get out.
Yeah, no, once there wasn't, maybe twice. That's later on.
Yeah, okay.
So then I make this street show, but I'm half working, still working for the company, running the stall. That's fine. That's a decent wage. That's all going fine. And then on the side, I'm learning how to be a street performer. So I'm developing this show.
Yeah.
Which takes a while, and it's terrifying, and it can be awful. And it's a very, as I think we still say, it's the most honest form of theatre, because if you're trying to perform in public space on the street of busy people who are particularly tourists in London looking, passing by, you've got to capture people's attention. You've got to keep them interested with a kind of the flow of the show, the routines.
The pattern.
And then you've got to get money off them. So all of those bits are a kind of skill in themselves, learning
You're
how
really
you
putting
do
yourself
that.
out there, aren't you? It's almost like you're exposing yourself to some degree. I don't mean literally.
Absolutely. Well, I did get, it was a bit of a kind of just quick change on it, but it wasn't exposing exactly. But I'm 21 at this point.
Right,
I'm not.
okay, yeah.
Don't worry. It was wonderful. It was terrifying.
What did it teach you, do you think, doing that?
Well, then I started travelling. Then I started travelling the world. It taught me that you can... I think one of the things it taught me is that you can stand in a street and do nothing. And if you have the presence and that it's something very particular, you can start stopping people by just doing nothing. People will start to look at you and think, what? He's doing something slightly odd. Yeah. This isn't like normal. Something's not quite right with that guy standing there in an old vintage suit holding a battered old 1930s suitcase. Yeah. He's going to do something. It's something about that which I think has carried through. Is I love being able to do stuff now with Freedom Festival, but with festivals that I work for and public space, changing real life, just transforming something by putting something on the street which doesn't quite seem right.
Yeah, looks out of place.
Yeah, and you disrupt.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing it taught me. I think the skills of the show and the showmanship and that's really important, and it's been I still carry that with me. I enjoy public speaking. I don't perform anymore, as it were, but there's skills within that. But it's that thing. It taught me this thing about it's great to disrupt real life
and get people to see
play more.
Yeah, get people to see things differently as well.
Yeah.
Because we just are all just walking around very busily.
Yeah.
And we're not noticing things. We're not. I know it's a common thing, but we're not present, are we? We're always just thinking about the past or the future, and we're not actually appreciating what's in front of us.
No, and it's easy to do that. People don't look up.
No.
You know, I love that
Even
with
more
festivals
so now,
now, doing stuff on rooftops and doing stuff on buildings, because people don't look up.
And that's one of the best things about Freedom Festival. You really use the architecture and that all the assets in the city and get people to look at them differently. Anyway,
I hope so. Yeah.
Back to Freedom Festival, but. So,
you've
got a show.
I'm leaping. So, okay, I'm going to try and leap forward because there's a lot of life between there and now. But I guess the summary is, I then decide to pack in the job on the juggling stool. I'm going to commit to being a street performer. I'm going to be a performing artist. I'm doing other kind of corporate gigs, cabaret stuff. So it's not just this street show kind of life, but that's bread and butter. I'm living in London, loving it. Great, training at a circus school, learning new skills and new tricks, doing lots of drama workshops and kind of building my skill set. And then I decided to go to Australia with this, not with the suitcase full of props, because that would be really tricky to travel with all that stuff. So I end up with this thing where I have 3 suitcases in the world. There's one in Canada, there's one in Melbourne, and there's one in London.
But so why Australia? Was it Melbourne because of the cultural
it's the weather.
scene? Okay.
It's the season, it's this festival thing. So what street performers do, or did more then, is they would follow the sun, of course. So they would go, they would do the European summer, then they go over to Australia and you do festivals there, or you get picked up for gigs at festivals, or there's some sort of street performer pitches in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and other places in between. And that was a real moment for me because it was terrifying. There was a moment where I remember being at St Kilda Festival in Melbourne. Been invited to perform there, so you weren't paid to perform, but you're in the programme, you have a pitch, you have space, so it's not like busking, it's a bit different. But then you have to put the hat out at the end, and I think I had $50 at that point, and I was on the other side of the world. I was 24, and I thought, if I don't make any money today, I'm kind of in trouble. I'm staying with friends, and it's okay, but I was running out of money and I was on the other side of the world. And I remember this day so well. The weather was great, the festival was good, there was lots of people, and I did 3 fantastic shows. And by the end of that day, I had a couple of $1,000 and I was like, I'm set now for another couple of months so I can stay. But just this moment of, can you survive? Yeah. Can you do it really with this suitcase full of random props? But of course not. And then all the work that went into forming that show.
But you obviously got some sort of thrill out of living like that, though.
For a while, then it gets a bit exhausting. But
You've got to be young,
it's thrilling.
Yeah,
it's stressful. I don't recommend it. I do recommend it. I don't recommend it.
Okay.
It's a great way to see the world. It's a great way to realise that anything is possible. It's a great way to really test yourself.
Yeah.
Like you touched on before. And then it spirals like that. So then I have a brilliant career for 15, 17 years performing, doing that kind of show. Then I get an agent very quickly. Then I get booked, so I don't have to put the hat on anymore. Then it can be more experimental. Then I create a theatre company. Then I start working with a French theatre company. I do a bit of kids' TV, which was...
Where was that?
In London.
Right.
It was weird, and but fascinating, a whole other world, because this skill
Anything
set,
we would know?
Oh, it was a thing called Trouble TV. That was a thing I did quite a bit. It was there was other sort of appearances, because I had these acts, so I could be this cabaret act. You could have me in the background trying to escape from a sack or whatever while you're, so it lends itself to that kind of children's TV. And there was definitely a time where that kind of circusy street performer sort of act was very useful for TV, and you still see it. Variety, Britain's Got Talent. Yes. They're not all amateurs. Sorry to
spoil it,
but they're not. There are bona fide professional performers who are in those shows. Right. They never win because they're too good. Yeah. But we were. I shouldn't have said that.
No, that's fine. This is fascinating. Carry on.
But it's true,
we're learning so much.
Yeah, I see some hilarious things with that. People wandering around Covent Garden as if, I want to be a performer. No, these are like some of the best, most successful cabaret acts in the world who are being brought in to make the variety of the show. Yeah. You're always going to go for the woman with the dog. Yeah. You're not going to go for the really slick aerial acts. So there was a lot of work at that time for what we did. So I carried on doing that.
What sort of period are we talking about now? How old were you?
We're in the kind of 90s now, I guess. Right. We're moving through the 90s towards the Millennium Dome being built and that whole thing. That happens there with circus, and there's a big sort of movement in the UK. yeah, and in a nutshell, I had a fantastic career doing this, and I realised that there was funding. There was international festivals that I started getting booked for, so then it became back to the passport of suddenly being in Italy or being in Belgium or standing in front of a crowd trying to rework a show, maybe with a different language or with less language. So I had a lot of experiences of this interaction with different cultures, but now from this other perspective where I was the performer standing in the street at these big festivals, being invited, not busking anymore, being paid, which was amazing. And it then became a fantastic, I mean, I can't, there's so many stories in there I can't even begin to start, but from Canada to Australia, lots of work all over Europe, New Zealand several times. There's a kind of circuit for this kind of work. The kind of shows that people see at Freedom Festival, they're on tour. Yeah. They're constantly on tour. Yeah. They might, depending on how they want to live and how much they want to tour, but a lot of them will be going to Australia soon for the Australian season. Yeah. And so you're on this kind of global circuit. It's fantastic. And then you start to go to these different kinds of festivals. And then I think for me, that's where it became I really wanted to understand how you made the festival. It very quickly went from how you make a show, then building a company, and then started directing the shows, other people performing less. And then I was really fascinated, well, actually, how do you do this big festival thing? Because it felt like that's like a big show, right? Yeah. You're putting on
It's like the ultimate, isn't it? Bringing it all together in one big platform.
I think that's what gets me to where I am, is I was really curious again, and I would spend more time with the festival directors and producing team than the other artists, because I was just fascinated by, so how do you piece this thing together? How do you get the money to put on this event for thousands of people? And I think that's probably quite rare in the art sector. I don't meet a lot of people who actually have been on both sides.
That probably gives you an advantage, though, because you've been on the coalface, so to speak, doing it.
I hope so. It also makes me a bit too generous towards artists. I think it's right, and I think what I've instilled into the two main festivals that I've worked for over the last sort of 12, 14 years is the artist is the most important thing. You look after your artists. You don't need to overdo it. It's not about mollycoddling people. It's about simple things. A good place to stay, good food, proper publicity, proper marketing where someone's come to see your show because it's really explained. Yeah. So it's things like that. And I think I've instilled, it's probably one of my proudest things, is how that is instilled in the team. And the artists are so looked after, and the way people talk about Freedom Festival and talk about Hull internationally, when I see them at other events around the world, people love playing here. They love coming to the festival because the audience are great and they're looked after.
Because you've built a good reputation.
And you built an ethos in the team where you make sure that that's the way to do it. Because I did lots of gigs that were awful. The audience were great, but I had to get changed in a toilet. It's like you do this when you're a performing artist, when you're trying to make a career. You do all these different gigs, which is where you cut your teeth. It's where you learn. It's where you explore all your creativity. But there's some, not every festival has the resources to look after.
Not every festival is as good as the Freedom Festival. That's what we want to say.
Clearly not.
So that curiosity about how a festival's put together obviously triggered something in you, because that was where you took your career next. Yeah,
it was. So what happens in 2005, 6, 7, around there, I'm actually getting tired of touring. And that is... that's a very real thing.
Yeah, I can imagine that. It sounds glamorous.
Beautiful, glamorous, great. Yeah. So I've seen loads of the world, which has been amazing, but you're always working. You don't have a base. Well, you do have a base, but you're not there enough to really develop those friendships.
And where was home at this
point? Brighton. From London, 10 years in London. And then I moved to Brighton, which was great, bonkers, brilliant city, highly recommend it, exhausting. Yeah. Very creative.
Yeah.
Didn't work there very much. We were based there. I know it's a we now, because now we've got a theatre company and we've got a show with sort of 10 people in it. Vans and stuff and big sets.
And was it your company?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so we were doing the sort of bigger street theatre work now. Still festivals, but bigger productions. It was a great place to live. I had a really lovely time. A good place to be based. Easy to get to Gatwick, easy to get to London. And London was the most fantastic place to kind of grow up in that, from a wide-eyed 16, 17-year-old from Cornwall to suddenly being in this, and really going for it and being really lucky, I think. And then Brighton, which was great. But I was in Australia every year. So I was living in Australia for at least 4 to 6 months every year for about 15 years. So I'd go like that. So Melbourne and Brighton were my kind of homes, really, it felt like. And
not dissimilar, actually, Brighton and Melbourne.
Yeah.
Culturally and lifestyle. Anyway, sorry, we digress.
Yeah, but Melbourne, what a fantastic, isn't it? It's just like someone's taken the best of Europe.
My husband's from Melbourne.
He's from Melbourne, is he? Right, yeah.
So he's pulling me over there with one arm all the time.
Yeah. Well,
let's not go there. Let's carry on.
Well, it's a funny thing though, because that's one of the things that is tricky with this kind of lifestyle is you go to so many places and you really start to think, well, where could I live? There's a nomadic nature to that, which also has a flip side, I think, which is where you never feel settled. But Hull is the place I've lived the longest for many years. That.
And you've lived all those exotic places and you're in Hull.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that. But let's come back to that. So you start to get a bit tired of the touring.
Yeah.
And this is about early 2000s. You said you were in Brighton, you got your theatre.
Yeah, maybe a bit more. 2000. I know that the last performance we do of a particular show, which was very successful, is in 2007. So I'm leading up to that. I get asked to programme festivals for people, festivals that I know in the UK, and they say, oh, can you help us with the programme? Because you know all the artists, you're touring all over the world. Who should we programme? Oh, yeah, okay. I can help with that. Fine, absolutely, that's good. So, and then directing other people's work. And then I made this series of work as a trio of work. It was called The Shop, which was this big outdoor show. And it was a barbershop. And it was a barbershop in the 1950s. Very funny, ridiculous show about these 3 barbers who saved the world from an alien invasion in a very cartoon, sort of vintage, sort of funny comedy, physical comedy show. Then I made another show called The Quarter, or The Quartier, which was a shop and then a tower block, and then the audience were all in the middle. And it was like a small town. People, characters, story playing out. And then I made another show which never got completed called The Street, which was like a western. So like an old western where it's sort of wooden set.
Yeah.
So you can see that the set is fake, but the audience come in from behind and they walk in the middle and there's this big street and this show plays out. But I never finished it. And I'll come back to that because it's a lovely moment that ties in. So I'm creating work. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's becoming more like a street. It's becoming more like a city. And then I was like, okay, I've got to stop. It's very difficult to run a theatre company, to make work of that scale in the UK. Very, very difficult. We had more support from the French system than we did from the UK system at that time. It's a bit better now, and I stopped, and then I started programming at a festival in Winchester called Winchester Hat Fair, which is the oldest street theatre festival in the UK. It's like 50 years old or something. Lovely, lovely little festival. And that felt okay because it was still involved with artists. It was still creative. It was good. And then there was a moment where one of my French friends, but at the time colleague, who was supporting our work in France, in Rouen, he came to the festival and he said to me, so you did it? I said, what do you mean? He said, so you made the show? I said, what do you mean? He said, this show, Mikey, you kept trying to make this show where you kept trying to build a town. Now you've got a town. Now you're programming the town. Look at it. And I stood there and looked down this high street in Winchester and went, oh, God.
So you'd done it without realising?
Yeah. So it kind of it very naturally moved into a slightly different type of creating. And I think and then it's about learning, and it's about understanding how do festivals work financially, partnerships, sponsorship, funding, artists. It's not easy. It's really not easy at all. So I went to Bristol, moved to Bristol now, went to work for a fantastic organisation called Theatre Bristol, which is a terrible name because it's not just about theatre, but they had a series of jobs, producers, and our job was to make things better for artists in Bristol. And so we would have lots of cups of tea with artists who would need advice about how to make work, where to find funding. So you'd be like a mentor of lots of different people. Brilliant. It was a brilliant project which really did so much good for Bristol in terms of the creative industries, from theatre to dance to circus to outdoor work to visual arts to design. It was a really amazing project. And it really taught me that there's all these different layers to this job. And if you're running an arts organisation, whether that's a theatre or a gallery or a festival organisation, because that's, well, I'll come on to that, but Freedom Festival is not, you see the tip of the iceberg, but actually what it is an arts organisation. So to learn to mentor, to support artists, to commission work, to understand how the system works, the ecology, okay, I need to persuade that theatre to give this artist some rehearsal space, maybe put a bit of money into the creation of the project. It really taught me that the webs that you have to understand if you're running an arts organisation to be able to bring different threads together to support artists. Yeah. And then I was offered a job at Norfolk and Norwich Festival. So I'd gone west and then I go back east. I moved to Norwich and I worked for a fantastic festival. And I was the assistant director and I was programming all the outdoor work, cabaret, Spiegel tents, circus, programmer for the masses is always the kind of joke. And then there was the festival was very, very layered still. A lot of classical music, lots of opera, lots of theatre, and this big sort of outdoor elements to it as well. So those 4 years in Norwich were an extraordinary learning curve of working for a big arts organisation in a senior role with a lot of responsibility and really trying to understand that mechanism and how it works. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and learnt so much. We did some great stuff there, and it's a great place to live in Norwich for a few years. And that beautiful Norfolk is stunning. Norfolk coast, if you get the chance, just stunning. And we would put work out in the landscape, not just in the city. So we'd put work on Holcombe Beach, this amazing project we put out there. So it was really, it taught me a lot about a much bigger scale model, big international festivals. So I'm sort of trying to learn all the languages in a way of how you build these festivals and events and how you do it. Can I replicate what I experienced in Sydney? Can I replicate what I experienced in Montreal? So I've got this thing in the back of my head going, okay, I want to make, I'm not joking when I say, and this is a very grand statement, but I want Freedom Festival to be one of the best arts festivals in the world, not in the region. And it's there's this ambition that's always pushing and pushing and pushing. The reality of that is very tricky.
Because it's got to be better than last year, and then better than again.
Yeah, does that mean it's got to be bigger, or does it mean it's got to... It's really tricky. What does success look like?
What does success look like for
well,
you
at
for
the moment,
Freedom?
I think it looks like a sustainable arts organisation where you can keep really talented people employed and work all year round. I think it's the business at the moment is the most tricky part of it in the arts. It's really... especially with the model that we have. But I'll come on to that with Freedom Festival. So then when I'm still at Norfolk and Norwich, and then this job goes out nationally for Freedom Festival in Hull, and I hadn't really heard about the festival. I knew the people that ran it for the 3 years. Up until that moment, I knew them very well. And I'd sort of heard about it, but hadn't really heard about it in the sort of festival circuit. I don't mean to demean anything or to, that's just the way it was. It wasn't really on the map because it was for various reasons. And so quite a lot of people said they'd got in touch, said, you should apply for this, you should apply for this. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe, yeah, okay. I'd like to be the artistic director, the CEO, because I'd always been the assistant director or the associate programmer, and I felt I was very ready for that. And so I applied for the job. I didn't get shortlisted.
Okay. Here's a story.
Here's a not very interesting to many people scoop, but it's a true thing. And I sent an email to the chair of Freedom Festival Arts Trust, very politely, but I do remember doing it, just saying, because he sent me a lovely email saying, you haven't been shortlisted, but we'd like to keep your application, and if it doesn't work out with the first candidates, we'll get back to you, kind of thing.
Okay.
Because I didn't have 3 years experience of being a CEO. I didn't have the 3-year thing. And that standard thing and that standard problem in any industry, when you're trying to get to that next step, if you don't have, it's not, this is not just an arts thing, of course. And I was at that point where I was like, I've got all the experience and all the networks and all the vision and all the knowledge.
And you knew you could do it.
I know I can do it. But I can't even get in the door because I haven't got the 3 years management. Because being a CEO, of course, of a trust is that's a lot of responsibility. I'm sure creatively they would probably thought, oh, he looks interesting, but do we trust him to run this business? And this business is so important. This guy who was a juggler, who was, yeah. So, yeah, I didn't get shortlisted. I sent an email saying, thank you very much for keeping my application alive, kind of thing. And then 3 hours later, I got another email saying, actually, we changed our mind. We want to interview you. Oh, God. Okay.
What did you put in that email to change their mind?
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked at it for a while, but I was just being very honest. I think I did say I'm in that unenviable position of, you know, and that's understandable.
Yeah. Well, good on you for doing it.
But good on Graham Chester's.
Yes.
I hope. I hope it's good. Because the festival's been a success, but because he was an academic. So I think he looked at it and went, hang on a minute, you know, he would understand that thing about opportunity. How do you really allow the next generation in, or you know, I mean,
well, thankfully they did change their mind.
Well, that's very kind.
No, it's very true. So this would have been 2015. I remember you coming to Hull, and I remember meeting you early on, because I'd just been appointed chair of bondholders, and I was at an event, and you were introduced to me as the new director of the Freedom Festival.
And what did you think then? Do you think, who's this
I thought, who's this weird guy with a yellow bike? You had a yellow bike that you were taking everywhere with you. But I immediately thought that you had so much personality and so much energy. I thought that you were going to be really good, and I wasn't wrong.
Well, that's very kind. It's been incredible. It's been incredible, because the thing that's incredible about Freedom Festival is, you know, as I've been talking about all these different experiences I'd had, it was in the arts world, it was in the entertainment world, it was always in the, you know, not jazz hands, but kind of kids TV, to street performance, to cabaret. I used to MC one of the most successful cabarets in the world, and we toured all over the world with it, sold out queues around the block. But it was always in that exciting, entertaining, cool, carny festival. But no one had ever said, can you create a festival that cares about social justice? Can you create a festival that has an origin story which links back to the abolition of transatlantic slavery? And that thing, I mean, that was what was fascinating in the interview as well, because I was very, you know, we said, really? You really want to talk about what freedom means? Because right now, in this day and age, that is a very hot, tricky, complex, but I was sitting in the Wilberforce Institute, surrounded by images, of course, of the past. And in my foolish, because I was a wildcard interviewee way, I said, this is really important to understand the past, but what we need to understand now is, what does freedom mean to a 15-year-old growing up with limited aspiration and possibility? Because that's what I wanted to go. That's where we will go. What does that mean in terms of climate change? What does that mean in terms of migration?
So you're redefining freedom to some extent.
Yeah.
Or maybe just putting a magnifying glass to it as opposed to redefining it.
Trying to build a festival which is entertaining, accessible, spectacular, funny, bonkers, has all of that, but also has a thread that runs through it and actually challenges notions of freedom or barriers to freedom, or gives voice to people who are often not heard or don't have the possibility to be heard. And that balance and that challenge was really, and it's a different thing. It's not like any festival I know, and not everybody sees those parts of it, and that's interesting, and that's fine.
I think everyone sees it through a different lens, though. Because there's so many elements to it. Yeah.
And of course, in the media, you see all the spectacular and the crowds and the fun, but you don't see those talks program where someone is talking about how creativity kept them out of prison. Or
I'm curious. I'm going to steal your curiosity for a minute. So, how do you start each year with a blank sheet of paper about how do you choreograph? Is that the right word? The program. Where do you start, and how do you put that program together? Because you're right, there is that thread that goes through everything. Where do you start?
Well, there's a whiteboard next to my desk with loads of names of artists and shows that I'm still trying to bring to Freedom Festival from the last 4, 5, 6 years of going out there, going to festivals, seeing work and going, oh my God, this would be amazing.
Right. Okay.
So there's this list there. Then there's a list of artists, particularly local and regional, that we want to support and work with and commission. So there's another bit there. And then there's a bit of space for other projects. So it's quite tricky. So I know for artists and companies, we are quite a difficult festival to get into because it is curated by me as the artistic director, but we're also supporting new talent. We're also working in partnership, which brings projects as well. So it's all these different layers. And then I still, with my passport, I travel a lot. I go to festivals to find work. So I'm always topping this list up. And then, well, it's kind of now. So now, a few weeks out from the last festival, I'm now looking at that list and working out, okay, if we do that, what does that mean? What kind of feeling does that show give? What will that be like? Is that too much dance? Is that a bit?
Yeah, so you want complementary acts.
So now you're making the soup. You've got these ingredients. You're trying to sort of now, because I like the idea at festivals that when people walk around, I've seen every single show that happens apart from the commissions that are new. I've seen everything. I don't book anything that I haven't seen. So I know what people are going to feel when they walk away from a show. So then I kind of program it. I know that they're going to walk away from that going, oh, that was hilarious. So then I'm going to put something on just here that goes past them, which makes them feel a slightly different thing or continues this feeling of, wow, that was incredible. Did you see the acrobatics in that? And now there's a musical project that's going to take you down the street. So I kind of see it as being a sort of puppeteer. You kind of program a festival like ours where you can really predict where people are going to go next.
Yeah.
So that's also part of it. But as I say, I think one of the other unique things about what Freedom Festival Arts Trust is we are commissioning and producing work locally. Yes, had a great meeting yesterday with Broken Orchestra about a new audio walk that we're going to premiere next year, which will be beautiful. People go on this adventure through the city. But I'm also working with a European network of 16 festivals across Europe, and we're co-commissioning artists and developing ideas. So it's probably 40% produced and commissioned and 60% brought in from shows that already exist. So that's the bit that I think is very difficult to explain to people and is one of our biggest challenges as a business, is what people see as the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. They see this festival.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. And there's a running joke, taxi drivers, so what do you do for the rest of the year? Yeah. I spend so much time trying to raise money and build partnership. So I feel like what it's become and what the arts sector in the UK is doing a lot, it's evolving into these different types of arts organisations. The output we have, over 120 shows this few weeks ago.
Really? Is that how many there were?
120 shows in 3 days. If you think about how many shows a theatre puts on, so we blast this huge programme out, thousands of people engage with it, but it seems very short. It is very short. 5 days now. But in terms of a programme and output and the impact that has on the city and aspiring another generation of artists, maybe, families coming together, the amount of people that participate directly in shows, which I love about Hull when we do. We put a call out for the most bonkers thing. Would you like to be? And yes, we get these brilliant people who are always keen to do it. Like the classic 2016, who's going to get blue and naked? That kind of. But it
was great to see the streets so vibrant and the buzz around and people just really. I mean, the weather helped obviously, but everyone thoroughly enjoying themselves, and it was all free.
So good. And again, it's back to this international thing. One of the best compliments I had this year was it felt like a European city.
It did. I agree.
Exactly.
With that. Yeah.
Because there's many festivals. There's many things like this. If you say to most people, what's a festival? It's a music festival, right? That's your first thing. Then there's arts festivals. Quite a lot of arts festivals can feel a little bit elitist. They can feel a little bit like, that's not really for me. Norfolk and Norwich Festival, like as I mentioned before, not elitist, but it has an indoor programme which, if you're not used to going and seeing classical music or opera or things, that you wouldn't go because it doesn't feel familiar. And so when I came to Freedom, my idea was, can we make this the world-class arts programme, but put it on the street for free, mainly, 95% of it is free. So that's a very tricky thing to do financially. Very, very terrible business model. Relies on a lot of partnerships and funding, and public funding and private funding. But let's not overplay the fact that these are some of the best companies in the world, and where they're going next is a massive international festival like Edinburgh International, or they're off to Mexico, or they're off to Melbourne, but don't overplay that in the marketing. Just present some of the best work in the world and see what happens. Because people who don't have such experience of going to the theatre all the time, we're seeing when they meet that kind of work, the openness in Hull, the kind of the reaction, it's extraordinary. And so why can't, back to this thing, why not have the best?
Yeah, exactly.
Why not? Last year we opened our festival with Gravity and Other Myths, Australian circus company, in Hull New. They then went to Edinburgh International Festival and opened, another way around, they opened Edinburgh International Festival, then opened Freedom Festival. That's a massive thing. We don't need to overplay that, but when you saw the reaction in the theatre, when people saw that show, it was, for me, it was everything. It was like, this is why we do it.
So what's your ambition, or what, the ambition for Freedom Festival? How are you going to improve it?
I mean, to carry on, I mean, we're looking for more partnerships in terms of global stories and issues, particularly around freedom. So there's a lot of attention at the moment to how do we get deeper into certain issues, how do we work better with... We're working a lot with academics and with the university to really understand if you put a piece of work about loneliness into a festival like Freedom in public space, a piece we did this year, what impact does that really have on people? Can we trace that? Can we research that? Can we really go a bit deeper into the impact of the arts and not always be led by other people's indicators like, well, how much money did the city make? Which is really important.
Yeah.
We know that during Freedom Festival, the city makes a couple of £1 million goes into hospitality. And we're really pleased that's a byproduct of what we do. But let's be clear, we're an arts organisation trying to bring the best, the most interesting and generous artistic and creative experiences to the people of Hull and visitors. We're not an economic impact organisation, but the byproduct of what you do. So we've got this interesting... What would I want it to do? I'd want it to be 10 days. I'd want to be able to do more indoor work. I'd want to be able to do more visual arts and exhibitions, more of a talks programme. We're looking about how do we take the talks programme into public space, citizens' assemblies, speakers' corner. How do we bring that bit into the streets? It's going down the same line, but I think the big worry at the moment is the art sector. It's not sustainable. We're relying so much on public funding, which is being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. We're lucky in Hull. We have a city council that really understands the value of arts and culture, and they invest as much as they can. Of course, it's never enough, of course, but they are committed to it. If you look at what's happening in other cities around the UK at the moment, they will scrap any budget for culture because they'll just have to focus on statutory.
So you're right,
we are in a good place, but there is quite a lot to do, and I think it's really important that we look back to what happened in 2016-17 when the private sector invested heavily into UK City of Culture 2017 in Hull. That was a collaboration between public money, city council, all the different trusts and foundations, and the private sector. And we have some fantastic support from the private sector, but it's not done. Just because people invest in 2017, don't just move on to something else. If you want the city to have a vibrant cultural sector, to attract best employees from all over the country, etc., you need to invest in it. And at the moment, we can't rely on what has been a very state-funded sector, where people can't afford. Cost of living is a real problem. So how do we carry on with Freedom Fest? I think for us at the moment, that's the challenge. The creative, I don't want to sound negative, or I'm optimistic about that. I'm very focused on that, but that's the bit which is very hard to explain and to understand, and it's something that's very important to me because, as you've heard in this conversation, that changed my life as a small kid, a young man from Cornwall, going into London. That 30 years was extraordinary because creativity and arts and culture, the things that it can really give you such a confidence, such an adventure through life, and it's everywhere. Everybody is creative. Everyone engages with it.
Everyone's creative.
So we try and give those opportunities. So how do we get away from this thing in the UK where people think it's a nice to have or it's a luxury? No, it's fundamental. Creativity is fundamental to a happy, curious, a society. Creativity in engineering, creativity in all different sectors. I'm not talking about everyone being a juggler. That would be very boring.
And weird.
Don't want that. And weird. So I think that's the challenge now with Freedom Festival, with the trust, with the organisation, is how do we maintain this? Because there's a lot of expectation. Everything's becoming more expensive.
It's a commercial business at the end of the day. So.
It's a commercial business, but we want it to be free. We want the programme to be free to as many people as possible, because we know that people would not engage with it if it was a ticketed thing. We want to flood the streets with crazy things happening to distort normality, to transform public space, to kind of, like I talked about before.
So let's, I'm conscious of the time, so we will start wrapping up. But if, looking back over this fascinating career, what would you do differently given the opportunity to do something again? We haven't got that long, Mikey. Come on. Just one thing.
I don't think I'd do anything differently. I don't think so. I think I don't...
Is there anything... Sorry, go on.
No, I don't really... I mean, there's always little things, isn't there, in your life, but I was going to say I wish I'd got to running a festival earlier, but I don't think that's right, because I needed that time to understand and to experience, because I love that. I love this. I love what we do now with this team of people. I love seeing the streets alive with thousands of people. I love seeing kids on shoulders at 9 p.m. watching a show going, I love that, seeing it when it works. I love hearing what the artists say about the city and about the audience. Maybe it would have been nice to have got to that festival director moment earlier, but I think that it wouldn't be the same, would it?
Like you say, all that went before has helped make you who you are. I mean... It's incredible what you can do if you just be brave, just go for it. What would you, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? I'd like to know how to relax better. We all. I've started meditating. Try that. Yes, it's helping me. No end. Yeah, I'm a bit of a workaholic. Yeah, just have to switch off. Yeah, not very good at switching off. But I have, in the last few years, discovered gardening. And my vegetables are looking pretty good. So, that's great. That's such a thing. So... just to wrap up then, you've travelled the world, you've lived in all these exotic places. How long have we got Mikey Martins in Hull for? Oh, I don't know. You said you've been here the longest. I've been here 8 years now. There's something you like about it. I love it here. I'm very attracted to places that have a strong sense of identity and places that are kind of on the edge. Yeah. And I'm sure that's to do with my island DNA from Madeira. But yeah, you think about St Ives, Brighton, Norfolk, it's a whole makes sense. I will be here as long as this project is sustainable, as long as the city and the people of the city support this festival. That's why I'm here. Yeah. And I love it. It's such a great place to live. Good. Well, we love having you here. I'm a fan of Freedom Festival. I take the family every year. I took my Australian in-laws this year, and they couldn't get over it. They wanted to see one show twice. We had to go and watch it twice. They loved it that much. Great. But no, it was fantastic, and I wish you and the team all the best for next year's event. And like you say, there's a whole year's work goes into it, and you have the other event in March, is it? Yeah, we do, the Awakening, which is our second event, but we're not sure. At the moment we might not do it in 2024. We might just take a breath. Okay. We need to focus on some other elements and then bring that back in 25. Okay. But we'll see. Yes. We will be doing lots of stuff in the year as well. Okay, we'll look forward to that. Okay, so you're not quite off the hook, because before we let you go, I have a question here that was left from our previous guest. Oh. They don't know who the question's going to be for, so it's quite random. Okay. Hopefully it'll get you thinking. So the question that was left was, if you were Prime Minister, what's the first thing you would change? I think you've hinted very heavily there. I would increase the budget for the Arts Council of England and other cultural activities, and I would make sure there's more arts and creativity taught in schools. In schools, yes. Well, that's great. Thank you. Good answer. Good answer. It's actually a good question for you, actually. Yeah. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been fascinating talking to you, and I wish you all the best for next year's event. Thank you. That's it this month. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly have, and I look forward to seeing you again next month. In the meantime, if you've got any questions or if you'd like to get in touch with us, please do so via our normal social channels. And until then, bye-bye.